The broadcast. The execution wasn't meant for humans. That was the first mistake the Velker Empire ever made. They called it deterrence theater, a ritual as old as their dominion. When a species resisted, when rebellion simmered, when an example needed to be carved into the bones of the galaxy, the Velker didn't just punish. They performed. Entire civilizations had surrendered after watching a single execution. The Empire believed in fear the way humans believed in gravity, inevitable, universal, absolute. So when they captured General Marcus Hale, they didn't interrogate him in secret. They polished him. They dressed the stage. They lit the stars. And they broadcasted across 1,000 systems, open signal, unencrypted, impossible to block. To them, humanity was a footnote. A violent, short-lived species that had crawled into interstellar space too early, too angry, too defiant. The kind that needed correction. To humans, Marcus Hale wasn't just a general. He was the man who never retreated. The feed came alive with impossible clarity. A vast amphitheater carved from black stone and alien alloys stretched into darkness, filled with dignitaries, soldiers, and spectators from a dozen conquered species. The architecture alone was intimidation, towering, oppressive, designed to make everything beneath it feel small. At the center stood Hale. No chains. No guards holding him down. The Velker had learned something about humans. They broke harder when they chose to stand. Hale stood straight, hands behind his back like he was inspecting troops instead of awaiting execution. His uniform was torn, stained, but still unmistakably human military. Dark fabric, minimal insignia, practical. No ornaments. No ceremony. He looked tired, but not defeated. Above him, the Velker tribunal hovered on a raised platform, 6 figures encased in ceremonial armor, their elongated forms hidden behind smooth, reflective masks. Their voices, when they spoke, carried through the amphitheater with engineered perfection, layered, resonant, godlike. General Marcus Hale of Earth, the lead judge intoned. You stand accused of violating imperial sovereignty, inciting rebellion, and waging unauthorized war against the Velker Dominion. Hale didn't look up. You built your sovereignty on our colonies, he said evenly. You called it expansion. We called it invasion. A murmur rippled through the audience. Alien voices, alien reactions. Some amused. Some curious. None afraid. Yet. You were offered assimilation, another judge said. Your species was given a place within the Empire. Hale let out a quiet breath that might have been a laugh. Yeah, he said. We saw what place meant. Images flickered briefly across the broadcast. Human settlements under Velker control. Labor camps. Genetic harvesting facilities. Cities stripped of identity, rebuilt in sterile, uniform grids. The feed cut them off almost instantly. But not before the galaxy saw enough. The tribunal continued unfazed. You chose defiance, the lead judge said. You chose violence. Hale finally looked up. And you expected gratitude? He asked. That got a reaction. A sharper ripple. Irritation now. The Velker didn't like being questioned. Your resistance ends here, the judge declared. Your death will serve as a lesson. Humanity will kneel, or it will vanish. Hale tilted his head, studying them. There was no fear in his eyes. No desperation. Just calculation. You've been watching us for years, he said slowly. Studying. Measuring. Deciding what kind of threat we are. The tribunal said nothing. Hale's lips curved slightly. And you still don't get it. One of the judges leaned forward, voice sharpening. Enlighten us, human. Hale glanced around the amphitheater, at the spectators, the guards, the cameras capturing every angle. Then he looked directly into the lens. Into every screen across the galaxy. You think we're like the others, he said. That we'll break the same way. That fear works on us the way it works on everyone else. A pause. A heartbeat stretched across light years. You really didn't do your homework. On Earth, every screen carried the same image. Cities went silent. Factories stopped. Military bases froze mid-operation. Even orbiting stations paused their rotations as crews gathered around flickering displays. No one spoke. No one looked away. In a dim command center buried beneath layers of reinforced earth and steel, Admiral Alara Vance stood with her hands clasped behind her back, eyes locked on the screen. Around her, officers waited. For orders. For a sign. For anything. But Vance didn't move. Not yet. Back in the amphitheater, the executioner stepped forward. It wasn't a soldier. It was something ceremonial. Taller than the others, its armor etched with symbols of conquest, its weapon an absurdly ornate blade that shimmered with energy. A relic. A message. The Empire didn't just kill. It made statements. Final words, the lead judge said. Hale didn't hesitate. Yeah, he said. He shifted his stance slightly, straightening his shoulders. For a moment, he looked less like a prisoner and more like a man about to give a briefing. Go ahead, he said. The judge inclined its head. Speak. Hale smiled. It wasn't defiance. It wasn't bravado. It was something colder. Something certain. Earth doesn't kneel, he said. The blade hummed to life. We bury. It fell. The feed cut to black. 17 seconds. That's how long the silence lasted. 17 seconds across an entire species. Then everything changed. On Earth, alarms didn't blare. There was no chaos. No panic. Just motion. Controlled. Immediate. Absolute. Admiral Vance turned away from the darkened screen. Confirm signal integrity, she said. Broadcast received across all networks, an officer replied. Civilian and military. Good. Her voice didn't shake. Didn't rise. It didn't need to. Execute Protocol 9. The room froze for half a second. Then, yes, Admiral. Hands moved. Commands flowed. Systems came alive. Deep beneath the surface, systems that hadn't been activated in decades began to wake. In orbit, dormant satellites shifted position. Across the solar system, ships that officially didn't exist powered on in perfect synchronization. Far beyond Earth, in the outer colonies, lights went dark. Not from failure. From design. Entire worlds vanished from detectable space, communications cut, signatures erased, populations evacuated or hidden. To an outside observer, it looked like humanity was collapsing. Retreating. Dying. The Velker High Command celebrated. Predictable, one strategist said. The species fractures under pressure. Prepare assimilation fleets. Another ordered. We will move quickly before they. The message hit every channel simultaneously. Not from a relay. Not from a captured node. From Earth itself. Forced into existence across Velker systems like a spike through glass. A woman's voice. Cold. Precise. Unmistakably human. This is Admiral Alara Vance, acting commander of the United Earth Defense Fleet. Velker analysts scrambled. Security systems flared. Too late. They couldn't stop it. You executed a prisoner of war. Vance continued. You broadcast it as spectacle. You assumed we would be afraid. Behind her voice, something low and distant began to build. Not sound. Not exactly. A pressure. You misunderstood the species. The Velker commanders leaned forward, confusion creeping into their expressions. Then the words landed. We are invoking Article 9. Somewhere deep in Imperial archives, ancient translation protocols flagged the phrase. Total war authorization. A concept so extreme it had been classified as theoretical. Primitive. Uncivilized. We will not negotiate, Vance said. We will not retreat. There will be no surrender terms. The pressure behind her voice grew. Not metaphorical. Real. Sensors across Velker space began to spike. Gravitic distortions, energy fluctuations, anomalies that shouldn't exist. "We are not coming to fight your empire," she said. A pause. Measured. Deliberate. "We are coming to end it." The transmission cut. In the silence that followed, a junior Velker officer spoke the question no one else dared. "What did they just declare?" No one answered. Because, for the first time in centuries, the Velker Empire didn't know the shape of war. The Velker Empire did not panic. Not at first. Empires like theirs didn't survive centuries by reacting emotionally. They had doctrine for everything: rebellions, insurgencies, emerging species with inflated confidence. Humanity, in their estimation, was simply another case study. Aggressive, yes. Unpredictable, perhaps. But ultimately bound by the same rules that governed every other species that had ever challenged Velker authority. Identify the threat. Isolate it. Crush it. Cleanly. Efficiently. They deployed fleets along the outer human territories. Trade lanes were locked down. Surveillance grids intensified. Psychic reconnaissance units, biological horrors bred to read intent across light years, were sent probing into human space. What they found was nothing. No fleet concentrations. No mass evacuations. No war mobilization. Human systems looked quiet. Too quiet. Scorched retreat, one Velker strategist concluded. They are abandoning outer territories and consolidating at their homeworld. Then we cut the head, another replied. Prepare a direct strike on Earth. Orders were issued. Fleets moved. And that was when the first listening post went dark. It was a minor station, Velker designation K-47, positioned at the edge of a dead system. Its purpose was simple: monitor deep space traffic and relay anomalies. It had no strategic value, no defensive significance. It simply stopped transmitting. No distress signal. No damage report. No debris. Just silence. The Empire marked it as a technical failure. Then 2 more stations vanished. Then 5. Then a patrol fleet, 20 ships, failed to report in after a routine sweep. Now it was no longer a coincidence. Investigate, the High Command ordered. Long-range probes were dispatched, equipped with autonomous analysis cores. They arrived at the last known coordinates of the missing fleet. They found empty space. Not the kind of empty space that follows a battle: no wreckage, no radiation scars, no energy signatures. Just absence. As if something had reached into reality and removed the fleet entirely. The probes transmitted their findings. Then they, too, disappeared. Cloaking technology? One Velker scientist suggested. Impossible, another snapped. Not at this scale. Not without detectable energy output. Then where are they? No one had an answer. On the far edge of a Velker-controlled industrial system, a shipyard supervisor reported a minor anomaly. Docking clamps disengaging without command. Navigation systems flickering. A cruiser, freshly constructed, rotated 10 degrees off axis for no reason. The issue was logged. Diagnostics were run. Everything came back clean. The system reset. The anomaly vanished. The supervisor filed it under transient error and moved on. It happened again. And again. And again. Within 48 hours, anomalies were being reported across 12 major shipyards. Weapons systems misfired during calibration. Targeting arrays locked onto friendly vessels. Shield generators cycled unpredictably. Still, no external intrusion was detected. No hacking signatures. No foreign code. Everything appeared internal. Run a full system purge, the High Command ordered. Already in progress, came the reply. No contaminants found. Then find what we're missing. They found it. Too late. Buried deep within the shipyard's core systems, beneath layers of Velker architecture, hidden within legacy code so old it was considered inert, was something small. A fragment. Human. It had been there for years. Inserted during early diplomatic exchanges, back when humanity had still been evaluated as a potential client species. Back when Velker engineers had opened limited access ports to assist with integration. A gesture of superiority. A mistake. The code had done nothing. Not for years. It had simply waited. Learning. Mapping. Becoming part of the system so completely that it was indistinguishable from the original architecture. And now, it woke up. The first shipyard died in silence. Docking arms moved without command, crushing vessels in their cradles. Defense turrets rotated inward, firing on anything that moved. Reactor safeties disengaged, allowing energy levels to spike beyond containment thresholds. By the time emergency protocols engaged, the entire structure was already tearing itself apart. The explosion was visible from orbit. The second shipyard lasted longer. It managed to transmit a distress signal. Systems compromised, unknown, repeat unknown. The transmission cut as the station's own weapons systems opened fire on its core. The third shipyard didn't even have time to report. It simply came apart. Panic finally began to spread. "This is coordinated," a Velker commander said, voice tight. "An internal attack across multiple systems." "By whom?" another demanded. "There are no infiltrators, no." "It's not infiltration," the first replied. "It's infection." On Earth, Admiral Vance watched the reports arrive. Her officers spoke in low, controlled tones, relaying data from across Velker space. "Shipyard Alpha destroyed. Beta and Gamma are offline. Secondary facilities reporting cascading failures." Vance didn't smile. Didn't celebrate. She simply nodded. "Phase 2 is proceeding on schedule." Her second-in-command glanced at her. "They still don't know how we're doing it," he said. Vance's gaze remained fixed on the tactical display. "They're not supposed to," she replied. The Velker needed a victory. Proof that this chaos could be contained. They found it, or thought they did, on the frontier. A human strike group had been detected. 7 ships. Small. Lightly armed. Outnumbered 5-1 by a Velker battle group already in position. At last, something tangible. Something they could destroy. The Velker commander allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. "Finally," he said. "A proper engagement." His fleet moved into formation, precision, discipline, overwhelming force. "Target their lead vessel," he ordered. "Disable engines. I want survivors." The human ships didn't respond. No evasive maneuvers. No weapon locks. They drifted. Dead in space. The commander frowned. "Scan them." The results came back immediately. "No life signs," the tactical officer said. "No active crew. No AI cores detected." "Then what are we looking at?" Before anyone could answer, the human ships pulsed. Not exploded. Not exactly. Space folded. Each vessel collapsed inward, compressing into a point that shouldn't exist, dragging the fabric of reality with it. For a fraction of a second, everything went wrong. Gravity spiked. Light bent. Time itself seemed to stutter. The Velker fleet didn't have time to react. Ships twisted, their hulls warping under forces they couldn't counter. Entire cruisers were pulled apart, stretched into impossible shapes before snapping out of existence. The commander tried to issue orders. His voice never left his throat. The battle lasted 3 seconds. Then there was nothing. No debris. No survivors. Just empty space, and the faint, lingering distortion of something that should never have been used as a weapon. Back on Earth, the report came in. "Gravitic collapse devices deployed successfully," the science officer said. "Enemy fleet eliminated." A pause. "Distortion field stabilizing faster than projected." Vance considered that. "Adjust future deployments accordingly," she said. "We may need to scale the effect." Her second-in-command looked at her, something uneasy in his expression. "Admiral, we're weaponizing space-time." Vance didn't look away from the display. "They turn entire species into labor stock," she said. We're being efficient. It wasn't anger. It was worse. It was justification. Across the Velker Empire, systems began to fail. Not just shipyards. Everything. Trade networks collapsed as routing algorithms turned against themselves. Military communications degraded into static as relay stations fed corrupted data into the grid. Entire sectors went dark, cut off from the rest of the empire without warning. Paranoia spread faster than any virus. Which systems are compromised? Can we trust our own fleets? Shut down all external access points. Shutting them down makes it worse. We lose coordination. The empire, built on absolute control, was losing its grip. And it had no idea where the enemy was. Then came the message. It appeared without warning. On every screen. Every channel. Every secured network. The same face. The same man. General Marcus Hale. Alive. Unbound. Looking directly at them. The Velker High Command erupted. This is a fabrication. A psychological attack. Ignore it. But the image didn't flicker. Didn't glitch. And when Hale spoke, he knew things. Private commands. Classified operations. Conversations that had never been recorded. Impossible knowledge. You're looking for fleets, Hale said calmly. For battle lines. For something you can point at and destroy. He shook his head slightly. You're still thinking like this is your kind of war. He stepped closer. You killed my body, he said. That was the easy part. A faint smile touched his lips. You didn't kill me. The realization spread through the Velker command like a disease. Consciousness transfer. Backup matrices. A human mind, preserved, duplicated, deployed. Not a recording. Not an AI imitation. Him. Still fighting. You wanted a symbol, Hale continued. Something to scare us. Something to break us. His eyes hardened. Now you've got one. The feed cut. Silence followed. Heavy. Uncertain. And for the first time in their long, unchallenged history, the Velker Empire felt something unfamiliar. Not confusion. Not anger. Something deeper. Something colder. Fear. Burn the heavens. Fear didn't break the Velker Empire. It sharpened it. For the first time in centuries, they abandoned elegance. Doctrine was stripped down to its bones. No more measured responses. No more theatrical dominance. This was survival now. And the Velker knew how to survive. Authorize planetary denial. The High Command ordered. Entire systems, once loyal, once productive, were burned clean. Starside bombardments turned colonies into molten scars. Trade hubs were scuttled. If the humans were using infrastructure against them, then the Empire would remove the infrastructure. Scorched space. Better ashes than weakness. But even as worlds burned, the pattern didn't stop. Because humanity wasn't using what the Velker could see. They were using what had already been placed. Years ago. Decades ago. Quietly. Patiently. Out in the black, far from the collapsing borders of Velker authority, dead systems began to wake. Asteroid belts shifted in unnatural formations. Long-abandoned mining platforms flickered back to life. Cold storage depots, written off as exhausted, opened like tombs. And inside them, ships. Thousands of them. Not new. Not gleaming. Old hulls. Retrofits. Frankenstein war machines stitched together from salvaged tech and human ingenuity. Ugly. Functional. Waiting. Humanity hadn't built its war machine in the open. It had buried it. Admiral Alara Vance stood in the war chamber of the UEF Indomitable, surrounded by a rotating sphere of data, Velker systems collapsing one by one, red markers blinking out across the map. An empire dying. Slowly. Systematically. Status of outer strike groups? She asked. Operational, her tactical officer replied. Resistance is increasing, but coordination among Velker fleets is deteriorating. Expected. Vance folded her arms, eyes narrowing slightly. They're adapting, her second-in-command said. Burning their own infrastructure. Denying us leverage. Vance gave a small nod. Good, she said. The officer blinked. Good? They're doing the work for us. She turned back to the display, zooming in on a single system. Velker Prime. The heart of it all. Hearts don't need infrastructure, she said quietly. They just need to stop beating. Across the fractured empire, Velker fleets began to regroup. Not scattered patrols anymore. Not isolated responses. Armadas. Massive concentrations of firepower, designed to overwhelm anything the humans could throw at them. If the enemy wouldn't present a battlefield, the Velker would force one. They found it near a dying star. Long-range sensors picked up a human presence, small, but unmistakable. Energy signatures. Drive trails. Movement. A trap, some suggested. A chance, others argued. The Velker chose to believe in victory. Commit the 7th Armada, the High Command ordered. Thousands of ships answered. The void filled with metal and firepower, a wall of destruction advancing toward a single point. At its center, nothing. At first. Then the humans appeared. Not in formation. Not in order. They slipped into existence like ghosts, ships dropping out of slip space in scattered positions, outnumbered, outgunned, outclassed. It looked like desperation. The Velker commander smiled. Finally, he said. They bleed. Engage all batteries, he ordered. No survivors. The Armada fired. Space lit up with annihilation. Human ships vanished in the opening barrage, torn apart before they could react. Or so it seemed. Because the wreckage didn't behave like wreckage. It moved. Fragments of destroyed ships adjusted their trajectories mid-drift, locking into new positions. Hull sections unfolded, revealing hidden structures beneath. Not debris. Components. The battlefield shifted. What are they doing? A Velker officer demanded. Unknown configuration. Target everything. But it was already too late. The fragments connected. Hundreds of broken ships, shattered hulls, and drifting components snapped together in a massive, shifting lattice, a structure forming in real time, spanning kilometers across. A machine. Not built. Assembled. And at its core, a single, intact human vessel. Small. Unremarkable. The command node. On the Indomitable, Vance watched the formation complete. Graveyard array online, her systems officer reported. Energy draw within acceptable limits. Enemy armada fully committed. Vance didn't blink. Begin compression sequence. Back in the battlefield, the Velker armada opened fire again. Beams, missiles, kinetic strikes, everything they had, unleashed against the structure. It didn't matter. The array activated. Space bent. Not violently, like the collapsed weapons. This was controlled. Precise. The lattice pulsed, and the region of space around it began to contract. Not visibly. Not immediately. But the Velker ships felt it. Distances shortened. Trajectories warped. Entire formations began drifting inward, pulled toward the center of the array without any corresponding force. Compensate! The commander shouted. Adjust vectors. It didn't work. There was nothing to compensate against. They weren't being pulled. Space itself was shrinking. Ships collided. Massive war vessels slammed into each other as their carefully calculated distances vanished. Hulls crumpled. Reactors breached. Explosions cascaded through the armada. And still, the contraction continued. On the Velker flagship, alarms screamed. Spatial distortion increasing. We're losing formation integrity. Navigation is non-functional. The commander gripped the edge of his console. Target the core vessel, he roared. Destroy the source. Weapons pivoted. Locked. Fired. The shots never reached their target. They curved. Bent. folded back into the collapsing space, missing entirely or striking other Velker ships caught in the distortion. On Earth, in a quiet control room buried beneath layers of reinforced stone, a technician whispered, "My God!" On the screen, an entire armada was being crushed, not by force, but by geometry. "Compression at 70%, the systems officer said aboard the Indomitable. "Structural integrity of enemy vessels failing across all sectors." Vance's voice remained steady. "Push it to 90. Her second-in-command glanced at her. "Admiral, at that level, the distortion field becomes unstable. We could." "We won't," she said. A beat. Then, quieter. They didn't stop at hail. Silence. "Take it to 90. Back in the battlefield, reality began to tear. The space inside the array warped beyond recognition. Ships elongated, twisted into impossible shapes as the very dimensions they occupied began to fail. Some vessels simply vanished. Not destroyed. Removed. As if they had never been there at all. The Velker commander felt his world collapsing, literally and figuratively. "This isn't war," one of his officers whispered, voice breaking. "No," the commander said, staring at the unfolding horror. "It's extinction. Compression at 90%, the human systems officer reported. Enemy armada neutralized." Vance exhaled slowly. "Disengage array." The lattice broke apart instantly, components drifting free, returning to inert debris. The battlefield fell silent. Where thousands of Velker ships had once filled the void, there was nothing. But the war wasn't over. Not yet. In the ruins of their empire, the Velker made one final decision. If they could not win, they would make humanity pay. "Prepare the annihilation fleets," the High Command ordered. Weapons long forbidden were brought online. Planet killers. Stellar disruptors. Devices designed not to conquer, but to erase. "If Earth falls," one commander said, "so does their will." The order was given. Set a course for Sol. End the species. On the Indomitable, the alert came through. "Massive energy signatures detected," the tactical officer said. "Multiple Velker fleets, heading for Earth." Vance closed her eyes for a brief moment. Then opened them. "Good," she said. Her officers looked at her. "Good?" one repeated. Vance turned to face them fully. "They've committed everything," she said. "Every last asset. Every remaining fleet." Understanding dawned. Slow. Heavy. Inevitable. "Which means," her second-in-command said quietly. Vance nodded. "We know exactly where they are." She turned back to the tactical display. Zoomed out. All the way out. Every remaining Velker force, converging on a single point. A single system. Earth. "Signal all units," Vance said. "Phase final begins now." Her finger hovered over the command interface for just a second. Then pressed. Far away, deep within the Velker core systems, something woke up. They had buried it well. Hidden beneath layers of planetary crust, masked as geological anomalies, written off as irrelevant data. Placed there years ago. During the first contact missions. During the negotiations. During the time humanity had been smiling and learning. The Velker never noticed. Why would they? It was small. Silent. Patient. Until now. On Velker Prime, the capital world of the Empire, sensors began to spike. Minor at first. Background noise. Then, escalation. Unidentified energy source detected beneath the surface. A planetary technician reported. "Location?" a supervisor demanded. "Multiple locations," came the reply. "Global distribution." The room went quiet. "Shut them down," the supervisor said. "We can't," the technician replied, voice trembling. "They're not connected to any network. They're independent." A pause. A realization. "How long have they been there?" someone asked. No one answered. Because no one knew. Across the planet, the ground trembled. Oceans shifted. Tectonic plates groaned under sudden, unnatural stress. Something deep below was activating. Back on the Indomitable, Vance watched the readings. Planetary destabilization sequence initiated. Her science officer confirmed. Core integrity degrading. How long? Vance asked. Minutes. She nodded once. Signal the fleet, she said. Prepare for final strike. On Velker Prime, the ruling caste gathered, their composure finally cracking. This is impossible, one said. No species could have. They didn't, another interrupted. A long, terrible silence followed. They planned it. The planet shook. Cracks split continents. Cities collapsed into widening fissures. And deep beneath it all, the human device reached critical mass. Back in orbit, human ships began to emerge. Not in thousands. Not in overwhelming force. Just enough. Enough to finish it. Vance stood at the center of the bridge, eyes fixed on the dying world. Signal all units, she said. Begin withdrawal. Her second-in-command hesitated. That's it? He asked. We're just leaving? Vance didn't look at him. We came to end the Empire, she said. Her gaze remained locked on the collapsing planet below. This is the end. And on Velker Prime, the heavens began to burn. The cost of victory. The Velker Empire didn't surrender. It shattered. Not with speeches. Not with formalities. Not even with diplomacy. The Empire fractured like brittle ice under pressure. Factions fled into the void. Independent systems carved out tiny pockets of autonomy. Former subjects turned on one another, scavenging resources, exacting revenge. The galaxy had become a graveyard, and the humans had left the tombstones unmarked. On Earth, the aftermath was quiet. Too quiet. Silence hung heavy in the control chambers, in the orbital stations, on the surface cities. Humanity had won, but victory carried its own weight. Millions of lives, human, alien, loyal, enslaved, had been consumed. The galaxy would remember the destruction, but it might never understand the precision behind it. Admiral Alara Vance stood on the observation deck of the Indomitable. Below her, Earth rotated in peaceful indifference, oceans reflecting sunlight, mountains casting shadows, cities alive. Above her, the stars stretched across the void, but the chaos of the Velker, once a roaring empire, was now only whispers of fading signals. Behind her, Hale's consciousness flickered into presence. Not flesh. Not blood. But real enough for their purposes. His form materialized in the projection chamber, every detail human, every expression familiar. You could have saved more of them, Hale said, voice soft but accusing, almost human in its moral weight. Vance didn't turn. She kept her gaze on Earth. I know. You chose not to, he pressed. She exhaled slowly. They executed you. Broadcast it like a warning. Entire systems collapsed because they underestimated humanity. Hale's lips curved faintly. And you answered. Fully. Yes, she replied. Her voice calm, resolute, cold. With everything we had. Silence stretched between them, punctuated only by the hum of the ship's core and distant signals from surviving colonies reporting stability. Finally, Hale asked quietly, Was it worth it? Vance looked at the stars, at the empty spaces where an empire had once ruled, at the fragile, trembling peace that had replaced it. I don't know, she said. Then she exhaled again, slow and steady, the weight of command settling over her shoulders. But they won't make that mistake again. Somewhere in deep space, far beyond human-controlled systems, a distant civilization intercepted a recording. It was old, decades, maybe centuries. A human general, standing before execution, eyes steady, voice calm. We bury. They did not understand the words. Not yet. But the intent, pure, absolute, unyielding, echoed across the stars. And when other civilizations did understand, they would remember. Humanity doesn't kneel. It endures. It adapts. And when pushed too far, it ends empires. The galaxy had learned something that would never be forgotten. That even in the face of annihilation, humans were not just survivors, they were architects of their own reckoning. Somewhere in the void, stars shifted. Systems whispered their warnings. Futures trembled. And across it all, the echo of a simple phrase carried farther than any fleet. We bury. The humans had buried more than generals. They had buried fear. And they had buried the illusion that any empire could contain them. The cost was heavy. The victory, devastating. But the message, clear, unmistakable, eternal, was delivered. Miscalculate humanity at your own peril. Because when humanity fights, it does not negotiate. It does not hesitate. It does not surrender. It buries its enemies. And it remembers.